Good morning, everybody. Welcome to NTWC Plus. It is the 30th day of October. We're getting ever so close to the end of the hurricane season. Glad to have you all along today. Fascinating program for you again today. We know it's going to be great because last week was amazing. Jason Sippel with us last week, and we've got so much to talk about. We're continuing that conversation today. But in the other seat, we flipped. Hal was here last week. This week, Bill is back. Let's thank our sponsors, and we'll get to everybody. So let's thank the folks who make these programs a possibility each week. USAA, thank you, USAA, the South Padre Island Convention and Visitors Bureau. Looking forward to being there again in April. Just kind of securing things in the last week or two to make sure we're good to go. Thanks to South Padre Island for making that possible. The Weather Company, Weather Boy and Weather Call, all the folks who keep us here week in and week out throughout the hurricane season so we can keep you up to date on what's going on the hurricane season and what's going on in the latest research and technology and everything that's happening around the world. Bill Reed's joining us this morning. Virtual background behind you, Bill. Are you hanging on? You are somewhere in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. Where are you?
Yeah, we're toasting along about 300 miles to the southwest of Madeira Island. Blue skies, a few tiny cumulus swells from a storm to the north running 3 to 4 meters, I guess. But they're long periods, so they're not making everyone ill like earlier.
What's the secret you were showing us ahead earlier about keeping you from getting sick?
These kind of, I don't know how these things work. I have no idea. It's something like acupressure, but these wristbands, a lot of people touted them. I'm totally a skeptic on this sort of thing, but I put them on and haven't been sick since. So, hey, I'm gonna buy me a couple thousand and stand down on the docks in Galveston and sell them to boarding passengers.
I think that's a smart plan. I'm fascinated by where you are and what you're doing. We'll get to Jason in a second, but I want to know more about this trip that you're on, coming all the way across the Atlantic.
Well, the backstory is a year ago, I was my wife and I were on a cruise that we had paid for to go down the Spanish Mediterranean coast. Her being ancestry from Spain, it's something she always wanted to do. And it was a great cruise, but it got all kinds of busted up by a huge storm Ciaran that produced up to 120-mile-an-hour winds in France. So we had to wait 3 days to go out, and I helped the captain explain to disgruntled passengers what was the cause for us staying in port. And he said, "Man, you ought to be a speaker on one of our troops. Can you stay for the crossing?" I said, "No, I can't. Got to get home." And he said, "Well, I'll put your name into you'll hear from our front office." And sure enough, 3 days after I got home, got a call from the front office, and we matched schedules on this cruise. This is the crossing where they reposition the yacht. They call it a yacht, not a cruise ship. They reposition the yacht over to Mediterranean, the Caribbean for the winter season. So I give 5 lectures on this trip, and they give Donna and I a cruise and me airfare. It's wonderful.
That's pretty nice. How big is the ship? You said it's not particularly big.
Maximum passengers 110. Maximum crew is 95. This trip we have 60 passengers. So there's almost a 2-to-1 ratio crew to passenger.
That's pretty amazing. What time zone are you in right now? Do you have any idea?
It's 4 hours ahead of you right now. So whatever they call that time zone. Greenwich -2, I guess. Yeah.
There you go. The transatlantic time zone. Fascinating. Well, maybe we'll hear more about that as we go through the day. By the way, we had an interesting thing here last night. I'm in South Texas, and we had a SIGMET last night, a significant meteorological hazard for volcanic ash, from ash coming up from Popocatépetl in Mexico.
Whoa.
It affected one airport. We got 3 airports here in South Texas, McAllen, Harlingen, and Brownsville. And it only affected Harlingen, which they're only 30 miles apart. It did not affect Brownsville, did not affect McAllen.
How in the heck could it miss? It must have been it came out in the Gulf and then transported due north rather than coming out of Mexico across there. It would have affected all of it.
Yeah, a strange little thing. We started getting notices that flights into Harlingen were being canceled and diverted. And there was you look up in the sky, it was clear blue sky. But there was a significant ash advisory, a volcanic ash advisory, and then a SIGMET came out saying that flights needed to be diverted around it. So interesting. I've never seen one of those, I don't think, in 40 plus years of doing this. I don't think I've seen Popo affect us like that. So anyway, all right. Let's get Jason. Bill, you want to do the intro?
Yeah, I didn't read the bio, but I've known Jason since he was a wet behind the ears young Aggies meteorology student.
That's right.
And, I'll brag on you a little. I knew at the time talking to you that you you were the quintessential weather nerd, and good things would come from you, and they have. Now you've landed what I think is a very cool job, working models and data and operations all spent into one, tied in with the Hurricane Center and Hurricane Research Division, and I'm sure you're enjoying that as much as I enjoyed being down there. So welcome, Jason. I missed your talk last week, but maybe if you give us a quick overview of where you ended up last week and where we're going today, that'll lead our discussion.
Absolutely. Sure. So thanks. Yeah, that was a great intro, Bill. We've known each other forever. Yeah, so last week I talked about the NOAA's Hurricane Field Program, which is it's science crewed by the Hurricane Research Division. I'm the deputy director this year and likely going to be the director next year. And what we do is we crew on the science side the NOAA P3s, and we also work with the NOAA G4 synoptic surveillance jet, and we do science missions into tropical cyclones, and we also do operational support for the Hurricane Center, so transmitting data back in real time so that the forecast can be improved. So last week I talked really I gave an overview of what the HFP, the Hurricane Field Program, looks like in from both a research and operational perspective, and I gave some examples and talked, fairly extensively about what we do, but I did not get into the details of what some of the data looks like, some what the planning looks like. So that's what I wanted to hit on this week. So if you can cue up that slide, I can kind of lead off. Did you have the first slide, the overview of what we did this past season? Go back. There we go. Okay. I can't. So is there a way to maximize this? I can't see it well.
That's about as big as I can get it.
Okay, there we go. Okay, there you go. Switched over. Sorry. All right. Sorry about that. I clicked on it and got it. So in 2024, we flew 7 tropical cyclones. You can see those on the left there. We had some research missions as well. We flew into an African easterly wave. We did some research work into Ernesto, where we're doing some cutting edge work, releasing drones, uncrewed systems, literally through a chute in the plane. The drone unfolds and it flies around in the lower part of the hurricane. This is kind of next generation stuff. We're figuring out how to do it. We're making that better, but I think that's going to be one way that we're going to be operating in the future. We have collaborations all over the country, a lot on the ocean side in particular. We're doing work both in the atmosphere and the ocean. You can see a lot of the instruments we dropped, over 1,300 dropsons. That's a picture of a dropson there on the right, what that looks like. We send, like I said, a bunch of data back to the Hurricane Center in real time to improve the forecasts. A big point hit on the bottom, we have a crew of about 15 people that do most of the work for the field program. And among those 15 people, we provided about 2,500 hours of operational support for the Weather Service. So that's a lot of hours per person, and it gets to be a bit of a grind. So, in the theme that, okay, this collaboration with the Hurricane Center is a great success. This data is improving forecasts. We know that we've shown it, how much it improves the forecast, but it's also a challenge for us. The travel, the limited staff, in crewing essentially 24 hours, this operational support has become a pretty big challenge for us. So I want to really focus on that, because that is about 90% of what we've been doing recently is these operational flights. So I want to show you kind of what this looks like. So if you advance to the next slide, go on more. So one of the things, we have a disturbance coming up. We have a bunch of calls with the Hurricane Center. We have planning going on well in advance, and up to 5-6 days in advance, we start calling back and forth. We have planning meetings. We got to, make sure that we're all on the same page. We have a 9:20 call in the morning with the Hurricane Center, HRD, and the Aircraft Operations Center to give various updates from the centers, make sure all our ducks in a row. And then from there, we begin spreadsheets that look like this. We organize on the HRD side who's going to be doing what on the flight. So this is literally an Excel spreadsheet from Milton. And we have all our scientists lined up by flights, by day, what the flight numbers are, when the flight begins and ends. And I share this spreadsheet in the division, and people go sign up. We have this ground-based support here on the right, where we have a lead project scientist. That's what LPS stands for. Aspen means ground-based, either airborne or ground-based drops-on processing. We can do it on the ground or in the air. I can literally process the drops-on data from this computer. I talked about that last week, and I'll give an example of that this week. So this spreadsheet is how people sign up for these various missions. And then we also have the radar support, where we're processing the radar from the ground. We also have people in this yellow column here. This is the onboard support. This year, we've been putting 1 or 2 people on the planes. We try to limit that because it's a lot more expensive to get people to travel. Over time, an average day on the plane is probably about 14 hours. So that gets to be a huge grind for people. So the ground-based support isn't quite as grueling, and it's easier to manage. It has its own challenges, working at home with families in the background, processing the data. But this is kind of an overview of how it looks like from a practical perspective of crewing. And we organize this for every storm. We go and figure out who's going to do what. If you advance to the next slide, as we get closer to the missions, we begin flight planning. And this is literally the output, the first output we get from our flight planning software. So this example is from Helene, where the green line took off from Florida, and we have a text file that we enter. We give it the parameters that we want. We tell, okay, how long each leg needs to be, what the orientation needs to be. And this pattern that's on here for Helene is called a rotated figure 4. We have other patterns that we fly too, depending on how much time we can fly in the plane. We have one that kind of looks like a butterfly, that's not as time intensive. There's another one that's just a simple figure 4 that literally looks like a figure 4. That's if the storm is pretty far away. We don't have as much time to fly in the storm. We'll just do a simple figure 4. So we have to consider, all these things, all these parameters as we're figuring out, okay, what kind of pattern we're going to fly. We also have to consider land, right? So AOC doesn't like to fly over land for the most part, right? So if we're up against Florida or down against the Yucatan, we also have sometimes not. So Yucatan we can fly over sometimes if Mexico gives us clearance, but if they don't, then we can have our whole pattern get kind of screwed up, and we have to reorient things. And we also have to forecast this pattern we're coming up with in advance. We don't do this on the fly that day, right? We're coming up with this a day and a half in advance. So we have to predict where the storm's going to be. And then there could be real-time changes. It could get closer to or farther away from land, and that might change what the pattern looks like. So we definitely have a bunch of considerations in designing this. And another consideration is that sometimes AOC has to evacuate. And this is what happened with Helene. So Helene was moving up towards the Florida coastal bend, and AOC has their parameters where they can take off and land from. And one of the things that was going to happen with Helene was that the winds at Lakeland, where we take off from, were going to get too strong. So in this flight, I'm showing this one for a reason. We have the AOC, who is the flight crew, the people that are flying and the engineering and whatnot for the plane, and us, our science crew, took off from Lakeland, but then they landed in Ellington, close to some of you guys, right? And then we flew from Ellington for a while. And that same thing happened for Debbie, and the same thing happened for Milton. We had the repo. I think for Milton, they did a repo to Mobile, right? And so this is all, an additional challenge. When you're moving people around to different locations, these logistics get pretty difficult. So you have to manage all this from a personnel standpoint. If you go to the next slide, this was the bare bones example, but we take that and we do this with it. So this is what our flight plan looks like from an instrumentation standpoint. Where are we doing what? And this is the flight director at AOC literally has this graphic in front of them on the plane so they can get a perception of what a flight is going to look like. What instrument are we dropping where? So we have like the green circles are dropsondes, right? The green and blue, we have a dropsonde and an AXBT. An AXBT is an ocean instrument. You drop it, it goes under, and it tells you what's going on under the sea surface. And there's various other combinations of instruments we have. Some interesting things going on here. We have the SUAS, little red, it looks like the Star Wars fighters. Those are SUAS. So we drop those to the dropsonde chute. They're all folded up, right? And they come out, they unfold, and then we control them from the plane, and they fly down in areas where we can't fly because it's too dangerous. And man, we got some really interesting observations from some of these storms from the SUAS. From Milton, I know there were winds well over 200 miles an hour down in the lower boundary layer. We wouldn't have captured those kind of winds elsewhere. We also have sail drones on this map. Sail drones, people have heard of those. It's basically like a mini autonomous sailboat with that is controlled. Our division, not our division, a different division at AOML where I work, has a lot to do with sail drones, and they can tell them where to go, and we coordinate with them. So we're coordinating with these various institutions that have these instruments, right? The hurricane gliders, the sail drones. We're working with all these people to make sure that we have a plan that makes sense from not only from the operational perspective that gives NHC what they need, but also from the science perspective that we're collaborating with various institutions to get everybody what they need on these flights. If you go to the next slide. So a very interesting way that things work is we all use a tool called NASA Mission Tool Suite. We all log in. We can get where this becomes really valuable is with it where when the plane is within earshot of the NACSTRAD network, right? Because then we get a view. The plane doesn't have very good internet. It's pretty terrible, right? So it's pretty hard for them to get real-time 88D data. So what we can do is we have a chat on this NASA. You can see the chat. One of the icons here on the left is a chat icon, and we can chat with the people on the plane real time and tell them, hey, this is what's going on. Like they don't like to fly through particular features. For example, in the eye wall, there's areas where we know a certain radar signature in the eye wall means that it's going to be really, really rough. They don't like to fly through those, right? So we know on the ground know roughly what their parameter space is, what they do and do not accept. And so we can help them kind of navigate, plan in real time their mission. We give them support. Now, ultimately they have the final say, but we can give them real-time guidance in ways that they don't get. There's a radar on the plane, but it can't see everything at the same time like we can see, right? So we're providing this onboard support. We're making adjustments if needed. We're helping them to see maybe where they should be flying, where they should be maybe dropping dropsondes at particular locations, planning various science modules. All this is going on. This happens from the ground, right? What I'm showing you right here is literally a screen grab from the Helene landfall mission, where one of our lead project scientists on the ground was working with the air crew to figure out flight planning in real time. And this is literally how we operate. If you go to the next slide, then I want to take you to, so we've gone from the overview of like a beforehand flight planning to real-time operational support in terms of where the plane is flying. Now, I want to take you into what it looks like from processing the actual data that comes off the plane. And this particular example, this is the software. This is a screen grab of the software for dropsondes. We log into a web server from AOC. We grab the dropsonde data. I process it. I get it onto my local computer, literally this computer that I'm talking to you on right now. I grab the data and I bring it up in this program. So this is the first screen that comes up, one of the first screens that comes up. It just gives me the metadata of where the dropsonde was released from, what the sonde ID is, what time it was released and whatnot. And there's various QC parameters on here, but it gives you kind of an overview of what's going on in the sonde. If you go to the next tab, next screen, this is actually data from the drop sonde. This is the bottom of the drop sonde. If you go, you can see the altitude. It's not very clear, but you can follow the numbers. It's decreasing as you go down to 30, 40 meters or so. And there's the various, there's the temperature, pressure, dew point, the wind speed and direction. You can see wind speeds above 90 here towards the bottom. That's 90 meters per second. This is in Milton. So I'll tell a little bit of an anecdote. I was not supposed to be processing drop sondes for this Milton flight, but our director sent me a text. I checked in with him, asked him how it was going, and he kind of was frustrated because the sonde processing was a mess. And he said that the sondes were in rough condition. He'd never really seen anything this bad before. And I had a clue of what was going on because of an experience I had on the previous year. I knew there was a good possibility that there was interference going on with a different instrument. And so I went ahead in the flight to where after they turned that instrument off, and I grabbed a radius of maximum winds. That's it, the inner core sonde from Milton. That happened to be the first sonde after they turned that other instrument off. Grabbed it. This is that sonde. I loaded up. And I went through the sonde. I thought, wow, this sonde looks clean. So I knew that there was this interference problem, and I had a pretty good idea. I let him know, hey, as soon as you get to this point, like the sondes are going to get clean. If you go to the next slide, this is a wind speed and direction trace. The previous one was a wind speed and direction trace. If you go back one, so I loaded this up and I thought, holy cow! Again, winds above 90 meters per second down at right above the surface. 90 meters per second is above. It's 210 miles an hour roughly. I thought, whoa, Milton's a lot stronger. This is the second time Milton became a Cat 5. I was the first person in the world to see this, right? Nobody, maybe somebody on the plane kind of had a clue, but I was the first person in the world to open up this drop sonde and see what was going on in real time in Milton in the inner core from this particular flight. If you go to the next one, this is what we call a skew-T diagram. It gives you a trace of the temperature and dew point, the red and blue. And then these are the winds. So you can see at the top where the sonde was released, the winds were strong out of the east-south, so west-southwest. It was kind of on the south side of the storm, but the sonde literally traveled around the storm and wound up kind of on the other side of the storm. That's how strong the winds were. The sonde moved around about 180 degrees almost around the center because it was so strong at that point. This doesn't happen too often. It happened on a number of sondes in Milton. If you go to the next slide, so this is kind of a summary of what the data was showing. And you can see down at the bottom, surface winds, I can't read it well here, but there's 160 knots at 10 meters. So 160 knots at 10 meters, that's in Cat 5 territory. So I see this sonde and I thought, oh boy. And I text the Hurricane Specialist Unit Director, Dan Brown. And I say, hey, I just got this sonde out of Milton. Like, you guys haven't seen this yet because I'm processing it, but just FYI, here's what the surface winds are like right now. I also happened to process the next sonde, which was at the center, so I got the central pressure. And I relayed that information to NHC in real time as well, because it would have been significantly delayed had I not been able to do that. And they need to know the central pressure. That's one of the things that the parameters that they use, right? You know this, Bill, to gauge intensification, right? So this is an example of how things are going in real time. Tab. Over one more. So this is what we call a WMO message. This is the message one of the messages that's transmitted off the plane. NHC, this is what NHC gets. They don't get the graphical things. They get this WMO message, but it tells them what they need to know in terms of gauging all this. The information that I previously showed you is kind of encoded in this in a different way. This is also gets transmitted to the operational centers as well, because this information is what is used to ingest into the models to improve the forecast. But this in text files, what this data looks like. And so we relay in real time some of this information as well. I'll send a text message I'll grab a particular line of numbers off this and send a text message to Dan Brown, for example, and say, hey, this is, this group looks like this, because that lets him know what's going on in the storm. If you go to the next slide, again, this is just more metadata where you enter. I didn't change this. I did not transmit this to NHC. I was just getting the information for them. So I have Helene in here. If I had transmitted this, I would have had the wrong storm. But you can change some of the parameters like the plane and the storm name and whatnot, and mission number. So this kind of gives you an idea of like what this looks like. And this all, again, happens from my computer where I'm working right now. It can happen from the plane. The same program is on the plane, but our capacity this year makes it easier because we're doing it from the ground. And in some ways, I guess it's easier from the ground also because you're not, if you imagine you're on the plane and dealing with all that turbulence, you're trying to go through all these tabs, highlight data, trying to QC out different portions of the sun that might be rough. If you can imagine doing that when you're bumping up and around in the eye wall, man, that's rough. You talk about seasick. If you go to the next slide. Okay, just another summary page of what the data looks like. We look at this too to make sure everything lines up. That's a dropson. That's what it looks like when we're processing a dropson. Any questions?
Tons, I'm sure. Bill, you're muted, so we can read. Tons of questions, I'm sure. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, it's some background noise. I didn't think you really wanted to listen to that. So are we there now?
Yes.
Oh, good. Yeah, was a whole bunch of questions. First one I had was that you call it a figure 4 butterfly pattern. Is that essentially what we used to call alpha pattern?
So it kind of looks like an alpha pattern, the figure 4, but it's just two passes through the center. We have usually in general, a north-south and east-west pass and a downwind leg that connects the two. That's it.
Yeah, the only different when we had it, we would always do a weakest quadrant first, out through the strongest quadrant, then around and reverse the pattern that as often as we could. But the same 90-mile legs, it's the same 90-mile legs going out, or
90 nautical miles. Yeah, that's a common number that we use.
Okay. Yeah. How much of what percentage of the data you're collecting with these great dropsons gets ingested into the models for real time?
So actually, in the hurricane models, most of the data is getting in. Some of it gets QC'd out. The wind data, we might lose 10% of it in particularly in the eye wall. Like you don't want to ingest all the data because sometimes the model just can't agree with what it's seeing in the dropson because the model can't represent that intense of a wind, right? And if you try to make it bad things happen in the model, right? But for the most part, we're using most of the data.
That is awesome. I'm glad you said about I was going to ask you about this. How many times around the tiny eye of Milton did the sun go on its descent to the pond? And did it do more than one circulation around the eye?
Yeah, the most we ever see is roughly 180 degrees, so halfway around. Sometimes a little bit more, but it doesn't go around multiple times. That doesn't happen.
Yeah. Well,
maybe if you drop from higher, it would, but remember, we're flying at 10,000.
That's right. You're 10,000. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Just Milton was such a small eye; it didn't have to travel as far and much faster. Where's the highest speeds you've seen near surface from a dropson?
That dropson in Milton, like a few of the ones in Milton, were some of the highest we've seen. I know Patricia was really high. But getting over 90 meters per second, there's not too many dropsons that get over 90.
No, it's like you're dropping into a tornado.
Yes, absolutely.
Radar data. I know you were talking mostly about dropsons. How are you able to use the Doppler radar data these days in the models? I know that was kind of a research mode thing back when I was still.
Yeah. So actually, I have another set of slides if you want me to talk through a few to answer this question, because they're graphically pretty pleasing and can help me answer it. If you queue them up again and maybe advance through them. But the short answer is, yeah, we're doing real-time radar support. We're sending it to the Environmental Modeling Center. The raw data goes to the Environmental Modeling Center where it gets ingested in the models. And we know that it's improving the forecast there, and especially in the weaker storms. So when we first get in, it can improve the forecast by 20 to 30%. In the stronger storms, it doesn't improve the forecast much, but it does help, in the first 24, 36 hours of the forecast, it can improve that as well. And also the storm size, helps us get the storm size forecast better. We also, I think another important thing is the real-time data. We do analyses of the data, so we can reconstruct what the wind field looks like in the storm at various levels. That is sent then to the Hurricane Center, the specialists. So they get a view of what the storm is doing. And one of the, I think, more important things that they're able to see is when a storm is becoming vertically aligned. This data can help them determine much more easily if a storm is becoming stacked, so to speak, meaning that the low level and mid-level and upper level circulations are all oriented vertically. Because as that begins to happen, Bill, you know this, that's a precursor to intensification, right? So this radar data, it helps us see that. And these analyses that we send to the Hurricane Center, they help the specialists to get a much better gauge on what's going on in terms of the alignment.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we're speculating all the time, at least in my era, of how well you can use the higher resolution satellite data to guesstimate what the structure is, but the radar's far more better tool.
It's like an MRI.
Yeah, exactly. So Tim, I think you're supposed to tell me to shut up and let you do an ad, right?
Yeah, let's do our midpoint break while we got an opportunity. Bill, I know you say you're in a meeting room, but I see guys walking by with armloads of liquor bottles. So
They close the curtains, getting ready for the afternoon movie.
We'll have you done in time for that.
I think it starts on the hour, so we're good.
All right, good. Let's thank our sponsors. We're midway through the program, and a fascinating program again today. USAA, South Padre Island Convention and Visitors Bureau, the Weather Company, Weather Boy, Weather Call, all the folks who make these a possibility. USAA has been part of what we've been doing from the very beginning at the Storm Science Network and what we were before that, and so many programs that we do, and they're a part of that, and we really appreciate what they do and hope you take advantage of the opportunity to become a USA client. I can't. I'm like Gronk, the guy that does the advertising for them that is not a service member. I can't be a member. But for those who can, you should. And the South Padre Island folks, we were meeting with them last week. They're excited about us being back there live again in April. So we hope you're excited about joining us there as well. It's going to be a great conference. Got a lot of great people coming in. So we appreciate that. Bill, there is a little going on in the tropics. You're, experiencing some, I don't think it's tropical impact, but your ship going up and down, certainly feeling the oceanic impacts of what's going on. Bring us up to date on what's going on.
Yeah, I'm doing a low and slow recon mission, 8 days to paradise kind of thing here. But yeah, USAA, I'm coming up on 53 years of them covering my property and people. I'll show you what I got on the tropics. I'll apologize if I'm not totally up to date because I'm kind of busy enjoying myself out here on the pond. Yeah.
And the movie's already on behind you, so just we'll try not to watch that.
Yikes. Okay, this is a cutoff low that's been going on for 3 days over Iberia. That's been the gem that gave us all the seasick weather many moons ago, and it's detached from the jet, which is roaring across Europe. Meanwhile, in our more traditional pattern here, there's a lot of moisture even into the Gulf and the Northwest Caribbean now, and some convection up in the Greater Antilles. But you can see from the cloud motion, there's a pretty strong jet stream all the way down to the Northern Antilles. It splits this frontal system out in the middle of the Atlantic with the main flow going straight north out of it and a secondary flow setting up to the pickup of the southern branch of the jet as it comes up over North Africa. Not much action on the ITZ. Our ship, we're right about in here, and we're going to be sailing down like this. We're basically on the route of Columbus on this voyage of discovery. It's amazing. And we'll be coming across here. There'll be another front before we get to St. Martin that might kick up some weather. And it's that far out in time, more than a week away. I wouldn't discount something weird going on with all this junk, but that will be maybe the subject for next Wednesday. With that said, here's the Hurricane Center's outlook for us is nothing in the next couple of days, continue with a 40%. And they mentioned the fact that it's not going anywhere fast once something gets going there. So we'll have a lot of time to percolate. I'm sure we'll see a lot of iterations on this before all is said and done. We're not the only show in town. Our man Josh Morgerman and James Reynolds are lined up to get inside this gigantic eye of Kong Ray, which really does stand for Kong King, which is King Kong. How they got away with naming it, I'm jealous. I tried to get to replace Hurricane Dean's name back in 2007 with Gilbert, and I was voted down. Never happened. But anyway, this is a super typhoon, and it's getting ready to auger into Taiwan. It's at 120 knots now. It'll be probably close to 115 knots when it reaches Taiwan. Look how large the radius of hurricane force winds is in that. It's over 100 miles. Big storm. So there you have it. That's where we're at with the tropics for now. Any questions?
I'm just most impressed that you've got internet in pretty much the middle of nowhere out there.
Starlink, they've got enough satellites up now. There's rarely gaps in it. I was talking to the captain. They used to have gaps in GPS too for that. And he hadn't had the problem with that of any consequence in a long time. And the Starlink, it was basically unusable for them until last year, and now it works great.
Your timing could be impeccable, Bill, with that system that's trying to get going in the Caribbean, taking off to the northeast about the time you're headed that direction. What do you think?
Yeah, well, I showed them the picture of Wrong Way Lenny. I don't know if any of you remember Wrong Way Lenny. Let me stop share and start all over again because I'll have a picture for you. I can share, right? I got to share again.
Yeah, you're unshared. We can see you now. Yeah.
Okay, so can you see this picture?
Not yet. We still see you and the movie behind you. Trying to figure out what movie you're watching.
What am I doing wrong here? There we go. Share.
Repeat the process, right? There you go.
Go.
There you go. Now we see Wrong Way Lenny. Yeah.
Wrong Way Lenny. 110 knot storm when it hit St. Martin, but it got up to 155 miles an hour at its peak there. And it moved, it formed in the Western Caribbean and it intensified while moving from west to east, basically in the westerlies, all the way across to hitting St. Martin, where it stalled and they had 34 inches of rain there. Just amazing.
25 years ago.
If that happens on this trip, I'll be talking to you from Barbados next week, which is okay with me. It's one of my favorite islands.
It'd be Wrong Way Bill, maybe. Yeah. Exactly.
I told him, be careful about inviting weathermen on your trips. Things happen.
Fascinating. Well, we're glad that you found a way to get in with us today. We appreciate that. Well, let's get back to Jason. We got a question coming from, did you have something else you wanted to add, Bill? Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I'm waiting to hear more fascinating stuff from our guest scientist.
Yeah, me as well. One of our viewers is asking if there are any public resources available, Jason, to see the data that you're getting into the aircraft that's getting to you guys. Is there anything that we could see publicly?
So sites like Tropical Tidbits, they get the data, and I'm not even sure how they must. I guess NHC has an FTP server. I'm not sure where Levi gets it. Levi Cohen is the tropical tidbits. He processes the data and gets the SONs in real time from somewhere. But you can see the recon data from there. Tropical Atlantic, I know, does as well. Not trying to do ads for these places. These are just websites that I occasionally do use in real time to look at the data. Now, I will say that it's not as real time as I get it, right? There is a delay to it. I'm getting it and processing it myself and seeing it instantaneously. The radar data, I know I personally can see it and get it, but that is not for public. If I want to post something on Twitter, I will, but we don't want the general public getting into that stuff because it would be overwhelmed. Our website would be overwhelmed. Within half an hour, maybe.
Yeah, no worse than that, because I actually do look at the soundings when I'm working one of those, and I'm amazed at how fast the turnaround is now.
Yeah, and the radar, unfortunately, like I would like us to have a better social media presence, and we're trying to work with our lab in establishing that, so we can share some of the stuff out on like Twitter or wherever we want in terms of a public face to social media, and we're trying to work with our lab on that. So that might become more routine in the future. It's just when we're pressed up against the wall in terms of doing all this other stuff in real time, and we have a kind of a skeleton crew, like sometimes getting advertising that social media part is that kind of falls off.
All right, Bill, jump back in. We've got a couple of more questions coming in, but go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I lost my train of thought. I wanted to make sure I wasn't interrupting viewing the movie, but nobody's viewing the movie. It's too beautiful a day. You should be out decked with an adult beverage on a day like today. I don't know if you covered anything on HAFS while we were talking last week, but how's the HAFS program working this year for you?
Yeah, so what we're finding is that the various hurricane models have different biases. None of them are perfect. So what NHC has found is it is best for them if they have forecasts from both halves and the old models, HWRF and HMON, because they all perform differently in different places. So they do this multi-model consensus between the four various hurricane models. Now, HWRF and HMON are going to go away at some point, so we're not going to have this forever. So we'll have to have a solution, beyond, when those legacy hurricane models disappear. But for now, that's the best solution is to have all these various models running at the same time and to come up with something that's kind of a blend of the forecast from all of them.
It's fortuitous that it works that way, because it's not, I can't think of any physical reason why that should always be the case. You're not doing any more work on the HWRF, are you? It's pretty much it's stable the way it is. It's a legacy.
It's as long as when it's going to stop working when GFS gets upgraded, because we use GFS input data. So whenever the GFS 17 upgrade comes along, that's the end of the line for HWRF and HMON. So, but for now, it's working and still producing very good forecasts. It has some places some places it doesn't produce as good a forecast. Some places HAFS is a lot better. In other places, HWRF does produce better forecasts than HAFS. It's kind of just depends on where you are and what's going on in the storm.
Yeah. Are there any new features you're working on to build into the HAFS system?
Yeah, so we're definitely like on our agenda is to advance how we ingest the data, and make improvements there. Also, make advancements on the ocean side and how the atmosphere and ocean are interacting. And we have this ultimate goal of ingesting oceanic and atmospheric data. We're not ingesting the ocean data right now. We're relying on somewhere an analysis of the ocean, and we have an ocean model that moves forward. But ultimately, we want to have a coupled system where we're ingesting data under the ocean and in the atmosphere at the same time, and letting them give a complete, three-dimensional picture from atmosphere to the ocean of what's going on, because that should certainly improve the forecast. The ocean is an important component of getting the hurricane forecast right.
Certainly think so. Yeah, like to tie up some answers between the degree of overheat of the oceans and the strengthening of the hurricanes we got, and having that capability would be very good. Tim, what you got for coming in questions?
Well, you mentioned, Jason, sometimes there's a lack of connectivity out there because of you just can't you can't get the data right away. Is Starlink something that could be used on the planes also, do you think? That could, like Bill's seeing it from the middle of nowhere out there?
I don't know the answer to that. I don't know what they're using. I don't know what the limitations are. That's just beyond my expertise.
How about density of observations? You're one plane out there doing what you do, and it is what the budget allows, of course. But is there an advantage if you double the number of planes, or double the number of dropsondes, double the number of observations coming in? Clearly, density of observations is a key.
So, a big project I worked on over the past 4 or 5 years or so was actually evaluating that, right? What happens if you lose dropsondes in various locations, and where, evaluating the environmental versus intercore versus over vortex dropsondes. And it turns out if you lose dropsondes anywhere, you degrade the forecast. We actually drop a lot more than we did 5-6 years ago. The Air Force used to not drop dropsondes at their turns at the end of their leg when they turn from their alpha to their downwind leg. I actually pushed on that and asked them to start dropping there, and worked with HSU to evaluate the impact of those. They positively impacted the forecast, so that became a routine thing. The P3s used to not drop dropsondes halfway between the turn and the center. We call them midpoint dropsondes. That started up really. I started pushing that around 2018 or so, and we evaluated a big project to evaluate the impact of the sondes everywhere. And yeah, all these additional sondes are absolutely improving the forecast. Now, at some point, it would be nice to have some kind of remote instrument that can give us all the same data the sondes do, but basically have a curtain of data instead of dropping a bunch of dropsondes. Dropsondes are expensive. They're $1,000 each, right? So we're dropping 25 or so sondes on a P3 mission. That's $25,000, of instruments being pitched out the plane into the ocean, right? So it would, we have some long-term goals of what this would look like, but right now
that was going to be my next question: is budget on that kind of stuff. What do these things cost? $1,000 a piece. That adds up.
It sure does. We sent 1,300 dropsondes into the ocean this season, just NOAA. That's
people wonder why we spend so much time analyzing what relative improvement that does to the models. But Tim's question is exactly why we do it, because those are the questions that congressional staffers start asking when we're doing the budget process. If you could show you're making an improvement, and you can show that at least theoretically that improvement should lead to better results at landfall, then that's the justification for it.
Yeah.
I think about if we put Elon Musk in charge of it, he'll drop the dropsondes and have them come back and be caught by the plane and bring them back and reuse them.
Probably would.
Yeah. Elon's getting to Tim's head because he's got his center so close to Tim now.
He votes here, this is his address is here. So yeah, exactly. So another question from online: is there a place where we can find a list of the model biases? Just reading the question from online.
No, not really. We do evaluations internally at NOAA when we run our implementation tests for the models. So kind of have an idea from those tests where the model biases are. Like one for HWRF is out east of the Antilles. HWRF likes to make everything a Category 5. And it does. And what the problem for NHC was, for a long time, like this would kind of get baked into the NHC specialist mentality, right? Oh, every cycle is a Category 5, right? And so that doesn't happen as you progress further west and into the Gulf of Mexico, if HWRF is predicting a Category 5 in the Gulf of Mexico, you're probably going to have a Category 4 or 5, right? But out in the MDR, out in the middle of nowhere where our data isn't as good, that's not the case. If HWRF's telling me a Category 5, I'm going to say, yeah, right. It's not going to happen, right?
Did HWRF capture the RI and barrel out there or not?
It did. Yeah. The models did a pretty good job.
I wonder if forecasters believe in it.
Well, that was the problem. It RI'd before we had any data out there. And so there was it was the time of year, early July, one strike, two strikes, no data, right? So the models didn't capture they showed RI, none of them showed a Cat 5, right? But this is, you have a degree of skepticism when you see something so abnormal in a region where you don't have good data. Until you get the data in, it gets kind of, it gets hard to believe, right? And so it's definitely like they place a lot of weight on getting the data into these models.
As well they should.
So, do we have time to show that video?
Yeah, it's a good time for it.
Absolutely. Yeah, hang on.
A great time for it. You were teasing us with this, so I'm anxious to see this.
Yeah. This is, I meant to get Milton up for you guys, and I totally forgot. This is Helene, but it still gives you a sense of what all the resources, how they work together. So you can see the P3s going back and forth, doing our patterns. This is very early. That's the G4 dropping drop sons. It does the circumnavigation around the center. Here's the P3s again. You can see all the little, those are all drop sons, and you can see a sail drone there. This was provided by the physical oceanography division of our lab. They put this together, and it really gives a sense of how the atmospheric and oceanic resources. I think these might be wave drifters that were released, those little circle things, and more sail drones, gliders. Just so many instruments in so many different locations working all together to give a sense of what the storm is doing. Really fascinating. That's the best view I can give you of how everything works together.
Did you get a sail drone into Milton, or was it too tight an eye?
I don't remember if we got any sail drones in Milton. But we've definitely had a lot of sail drones into near the inner core this year of various storms.
Yeah. That's cool.
Amazing stuff. Well, so where are we going? Where do you see this headed? What's the next phase, if you will?
Yeah, so NOAA's getting C-130s. So our P3s are reaching the end of their life cycle sooner rather than later. We need to, roughly around 2030, we need to have the new platform. They've already purchased two C-130s. It's really expensive. They're over, it's like $350 million, right? Oh yeah, it's not cheap, right? That's a big investment. You got to get all the instruments on. Like, this is not a small deal, right? And we also got two G550s. The first one's coming online next year, and our G4 is very old, right? Bill, you remember when the G4 came around? It was in the mid '90s.
That's Bob Sheets' program. He got it for it.
So we have the replacement for the G4 happening soon, and a second G550 is coming, so we can have two synoptic surveillance jets operating together, and we have two C-130s coming online towards the end of the decade. We would like to have more. Our limitation is right now between crewing and planes that we can only really cover one primary U.S. threat. With more planes and more crews, we could cover, if we had two hurricanes approaching U.S. or one approaching Hawaii and one approaching CONUS, right? So at least now, like we have the replacements lined up, and so the challenge is going to be how to use them. The same kind of radar that we have on the P3, tail Doppler radar does not fit on the on the C-130s. So we have to design and implement a new radar, figure out how that works, how that looks, and figure out how to use the data, right? That's a big challenge coming up. So that's something I've been involved in talks with. And then, new instruments on the planes, right? I think we would like to advance beyond some of the instruments we have right now to get next generation stuff. And we're having conversations what that looks like. Had a meeting with the Hurricane Center and NESDIS and our division recently about this, actually.
Kind of a follow-up. Talk about, you had a sign-up sheet for staffing the flights. Is it ever difficult to get people to get on the flights? The people that you need, whether it's from pilot down to the onboard scientist, whatever. Do you have
So we're not responsible for the staffing side on the pilots, the air crew. Like, that's AOC. I think I would say though that, like, I mean, there's people at AOC whose houses were impacted by Milton, right? So they have challenges too. We're not the only ones with challenges. Our challenge, but yes, there's times when we have holes in the schedule, and I will say in Milton, we were so shorthanded because we've lost some people. In our division director, our deputy director, were both doing ground-based support, as well as myself and the HFP director. All four of us were doing ground-based support just to make it work, just to make sure that the data was getting off, right? That is not something ideally you want management doing, because management is supposed to be doing management things, right? They have their plates full. But we all got together and just worked our butts off and made it happen, right? But yeah, there's times because we're so shorthanded at this point in time that you do what you do, you have to make things work. But there's definitely some challenges.
Do you get on the plane often?
I flew Ernesto this year. I was supposed to be on Milton, actually, but giving my situation where they really want me to learn the ropes of how to manage the program from the ground, the decision was made, no, I need to be on the ground doing scheduling, flight planning, learning the ropes there, interacting with AOC on that management side to make sure that I know how to make things work next year. So I did fly Ernesto. That's the only storm I flew. I actually haven't flown a lot compared to a lot of our people. I only recently became more active in the program. Like last year, I flew Nigel and Franklin and Idalia. And so I flew more last year than I did this year. But it's I enjoy it for sure. But at this point in time, like the need is for me to step up and fill this other role. So I'll get to fly again at some point in the future, but not next year. Next year, I'm on the ground most of the time.
Fascinating stuff. Do you have any final thoughts as we wrap this up? We're coming up on the top of the hour. Bill's movies rolling behind.
Yeah, real quick. Can we load up the image of the TDR data? Can loop through it real quick, and is there a way to do that? Yeah. So here we go. This just gives you an image. This is Milton, right? The first TDR through the flights, just loop through. This is the MRI I'm talking about. So the rainfall intensity is on the left, the wind speed's on the right. If you could just loop through it, like you can see the intensification, how quickly Milton got very intense, and we were there for it. It gave NHC a really in-depth view of what was going on in a way that they just would not have otherwise. Air Force does not have the radars that we have. Really good stuff there. This was the landfall flight. So yeah, final thoughts. I love my job. It's really challenging. It's exhausting, but I feel like I have the coolest job in the world. Like getting to do this, getting to fly on the plane, getting to see the data through from the plane all the way through to the ground and into, because I'm also involved in ingesting the data into the models on that side too, right? There's very few people that get to do that. It's a great, wonderful job. And I'm excited that what we do can impact positively so many people on the ground. That's what drives us.
Love to see that passion. Love to see the passion. Bill, final thoughts from your end in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean?
Yeah, Jason, great to see all you've done. It's like Tim said, it shows how much you love it through the passion there. You do have one of the greatest jobs for a meteorologist to have, and look forward to talking to you every year about new and wonderful things we're learning about the science of hurricanes.
It was a pleasure to be here. Love doing this with you guys.
Thanks, Jason. I feel like we could do 2 or 3 more hours of this.
We really could. There's so much to talk about.
But we hope you'll be with us in person in April in South Padre Island. We'd love to have you.
Glad to. Yeah, I definitely I will do my best to be there. As far as I know, I'm able to go. So
that sounds terrific. Well, thank you for the program today. Thanks for making the effort to be with us 2 weeks in a row. And Bill, thank you for getting your a break from your cruise, and you're missing the movie going on behind you back there, but you can turn and watch now. Other side. There you go.
There's nobody watching it. I was afraid I was interrupting people.
Well, enjoy the cruise, Bill. We look forward to hearing next week from wherever you are then on how the rest of it went across the Atlantic Ocean. Guys, thanks for being here. We appreciate it. Let's thank our sponsors once again. The folks who make these programs a reality week in and week out. NTWC Plus is who we are. USAA, the South Padre Island Convention and Visitors Bureau, the Weather Company, Weather Boy, and Weather Call, all a big part of these programs, and we appreciate that. So thank you to them. We'll be back next week with another program for you. In the meantime, y'all stay safe. Watch out for the volcanic ash if you're nowhere near us. In the meantime, we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.